But did you know that Africa is the place where the body of the first man was found? My daddy says that makes it a place where all people originated from. I'm from Africa, you from Africa, you African booty scratcher. We make niggas disappear like that triangle by Bermuda. They can't find his body, but they know that I'm the shooter. I say cut my sentence in half, and I'll spread a little room. Deal? Well, you go up in Oklahoma if you want to find them sooner.
Yeah. What it do, what it do, what it do, what it do. Back for another classic in the history book of the Strictly Ghetto Engine. And this chapter is called Black Seminoles and the Seminole War, Dawes Commission, and Statehood and Beyond. Which this is the end of his brief description of the Black Seminoles. And then we're going to go into the next section, or I would say section, or next part of the study, where he's kind of getting into his primaries and stuff like that. But I appreciate everybody tapping in for this series. I appreciate everybody tapping in for this series. Definitely pull up, roll up. I'm so glad that you showed up to comment, like, subscribe, tell a friend, and do it again. So we're going to start at the Civil War. And after the departure of Wildcat and Gopher John in 1850, the situation of the Black Seminoles in the Indian Territory completely disintegrated. Left alone without leaders, army protection, or the safety of numbers, they were preyed upon by their enemies. Their villages were broken up, and those who remained were scattered. Many were seized and literally sold down the river, and others were sold by their Seminole masters to slave traders. With the outbreak of the Civil War, the pro-Union faction among the Seminoles fled to Kansas with nearly all the Seminole blacks. Some of those blacks who escaped joined the 1st Kansas Colored Infantry, organized in 1863, and they fought at the Cabin Creek and Honey Springs. The Confederate Seminoles, who remained in the Indian Territory, passed a law enslaving all free blacks in the nation and confiscating their property. And ironically, it was the Seminole Negroes who stayed behind and protected the Seminole Agency archives and records during the turmoil of the war. Long live the Black Seminoles. And And after the end of the Seminole War in August in 1866, the Seminole Nation concluded a treaty with the United States and agreed to adopt the blacks and place them on an equal footing with the Indians. And the Seminole freedmen, as the Black Seminoles were now called, finally found a resting place of their long, arduous journey. And the journey ain't over with because we coming for more that was taken from us by these busters that's running stuff right now. So I definitely thought that was definitely very interesting that the Black Seminoles who stayed behind and protected the Seminole Agency archives and records during the turmoil of the war. Long live the Black Seminoles. Now we go into the Dawes Commission. In the years between the end of the Seminole War and the turn of the century were a golden era for the freedmen and Indian Territory. The United States government moved the Seminole Nation east and reduced its size, but it remained self-governing, and the freedmen participated fully in tribal affairs. In accordance with the 1866 treaty, they became citizens of the Seminole Nation, and the white officials continued to urge an improvement in their status. And the freedmen controlled six of the 42 seats of the tribal council, and several of them served with distinction in the Seminole Light Horse Police. Unofficially, conditions improved as well. The freedmen reestablished their towns and built new churches. They cleared the land and made prosperous farms, and their property rights and children attended the same schools. Their relatives became, and the relations between the two groups became much more cordial. There was a great deal of intermarriage during this period, and the situation began to resemble the early days in Florida before removal. And at this time, two important leaders arose who are still well remembered by the Seminole freedmen. They are Caesar Bruner and Dozier Barkus. Can't fault. Long live Caesar Bruner and Dozier Barkus. And in the days after the Civil War, the Seminole Nation was divided into 14 bands, two which are composed of freedmen. These two were the first two leaders of their respective bands, and these bands still bear their names today. Dozier Barkus and Caesar Bruner were capable leaders, and they were the first Negroes to be accepted as important figures in the Seminole tribe since the blacks and Indians fought together in Florida. Long live the Black Seminoles. And unfortunately, this golden era will last only about 30 years. With increasing white settlement and adjoining Oklahoma Territory, Congress took steps towards the dissolution of the Seminole government in Indian Territory. It established the Dawes Commission, which reached an agreement with the Seminole Nation in 1897. Most of the Seminole tribal land was broken up into individual allotments and distributed among the Indians and freedmen. Each allottee received a minimum of 40 acres, which was non-taxable and could not be sold after the extinguishment of tribal government. Dawes Commission's officials surveyed the Seminole lands and prepared a roll of citizens. They completed their work and assigned allotments in 1899. And at that time, there were about 3,000 Seminoles, roughly one-third of whom were freedmen. These were confusing times in the freedmen. These were confusing times for the freedmen, who had who had known only the Indian way for more than a century. In 1901, in 1901, they and the Seminole Indians were made citizens of the United States for the first time. In 1904, President Theodore Roosevelt, acting under pressure from land-hungry whites, removed the restriction status from the freedmen lands. Damn. Land grifters swarmed in, and many freedmen were cheated out of their homes and property. And that's what happened to. That's definitely what happened to my peoples. Cause my grandpa definitely always be saying about how his daddy was talking about that when he was young and bringing up this one man that was down there taking people's land. And many freemen were cheated out of their homes and property. Railroads came into the area at this time, bringing Negro laborers whose ways were foreign to the freedmen. So once again, we got a difference between the indigenous black people from over here and the people that they bringing over here. It's a big difference. They can see it. They been seeing the difference. Those blacks were treated as inferior by the white newcomers, and the freedmen felt their own social position slipping. Communities of white horse thieves, outlaws, liquor dealers formed in the western border of the nation. Finally, in 1906, the Seminole tribal government was dissolved and the freedmen came under a heavy hand of federal courts and police. The Alusties were once again in the white man's world. Can't get away from them. So now we in statehood and beyond. In 1906, the Congress passed the Enable Act, permitting the people of Oklahoma and Indian Territory to form a single state. This approaching statehood had terrible consequences for the freedmen. The Constitutional Convention, which convened in November, overwhelmingly supported segregation. And the new Constitution placed whites and Indians together in one category and blacks in another. Another tool and a tactic of stealing our identity. Okay. Read that again. The new Constitution placed whites and Indians together in one category and blacks in another, and it proved for segregated schools. And after statehood in 1907, the Oklahoma legislature passed more laws preventing blacks from marrying whites and Indians, providing for separate bathrooms, transportation, and even telephone booths, and limiting the Negro franchise. You know, we was making that money back then. We had homes, so we had a lot of black towns, had a lot of big companies, black companies in eastern Oklahoma, and they was definitely coming up with ways within the paperwork, just like I was showing back in Florida, whenever they first had got control of the land of Florida, and they recognized that there was a lot of free blacks in Florida, and they was coming up. The judges in the legislative council was coming up with ways within the paperwork where they can structure it to where they wouldn't be breaking the law to be able to hunt black people. And as you see right here, they came up with new paperwork to be able to take the land and to be also limit the Negro franchise. A number of blacks organized across which opposed these developments. One of the most important was the Negro Protection League, led by Cody Johnson, a black lawyer. In the final days of the Seminole Nation, Johnson had gained prominence as a legal advisor and interpreter for Chief Opopo Miko. Johnson was a Creek freedman who spoke the Muskogee language fluently and who was well respected in the Seminole community, but Johnson and his fellow black leaders failed in their attempt to hold off segregation in Oklahoma. As time went on, conditions worsened and the freedmen and Seminoles were driven apart once again, this time of social extraction and the force of racist laws. And the Seminole freedmen had come to enjoy the privileged status, and the Seminole freedmen had come to enjoy a privileged status in the years following the Civil War, and they were shocked and frightened by these sudden changes. As early in the 1901, some of them responded by joining the Crazy Snake Rebellion led by Cheeto Harjo, a Creek Indian who preached nativism and opposed the Dawes Commission. In 1910, a rash of lynchings began in Oklahoma, which was to continue for most of a decade. Stunned by the loss of their property and social position, and now subject to an atmosphere of fear, some of the Seminole freedmen turned to Chief Sam. Some of the Seminole freedmen turned to Chief Sam's Back to Africa movement. Definitely got to look at that. Chief Sam was a native of the Gold Coast of West Africa who appeared in eastern Oklahoma in 1913. Who is Chief Sam? Was a native of the Gold Coast in West Africa who appeared in eastern Oklahoma in 1913, exhorting a return to Africa and selling shares in a colonization scheme. So he got a scheme to be able to get funding, to be able to get some money, to be able to bust a business move, to be able to basically ship niggas. I got to look into that person. Definitely. Chief Sam, 1913. And collected enough money to buy ships. And in August 1914, he set sail with 60 followers from Galveston bound for the Gold Coast. Although briefly interred by the British in Sierra Leone, Sam and his followers ultimately reached their destination in January of 1915. So 1915. The colony lasted barely 8 months, and most of the Oklahoma blacks managed to return home. Several, however, remained, including, it is said, some Seminole. Several, however, remained, including, it is said, some Seminole freedmen. So some stayed, some came back. That's definitely interesting. Definitely got to look into that. 1914 and subsequent years. A moment. Chief Sam, okay. In subsequent years, the freedmen had continued their struggle for freedom and have maintained a strong sense of group identity. Many of them went off and fight in the World War I and II, and some of those who left decided to settle elsewhere, principally in California and other parts of Oklahoma. But the freedmen maintain close family ties, and those who have moved away usually return home on holidays. A few of the freedmen became wealthy in the 1920s when important ore discoveries were made in Seminole County, but that wealth was ephemeral. Many are still poor, but the opportunities which arisen since the 1960s have enabled some to obtain university education and to hold professional positions. Today's freemen are deeply religious, and their community life is centered on several Baptist churches in rural Seminole County. The Thomastown Church, south of Wewoka, was founded in 1867 and one of the oldest church communities in Oklahoma. That's right across the street from our place. Long live the Black Seminoles. Many elderly people still live in their many elderly people still live on their allotments near the country churches. Man, we still there, and a lot of other people. We having a reunion this weekend, hopefully to get some good footage for the people and for the family. And some younger freemen have become prosperous farmers and ranchers. Others have moved to small towns in the Seminole County or to Oklahoma City. Shout out Oklahoma City East Side, where they have entered the trades and service industry. But wherever they live, the freemen return often to their rural churches for holiday services, baptisms, and funerals. The freemen still control six seats on the Seminole Council, but their relations with the Indians have not yet returned to what they were in Florida before removal or in Indian Territory after the Civil War. Many Seminoles represent the freemen a presence on their council, and they oppose sharing medical assistance and other benefits coming to the tribe. But coming to the tribe still, the freemen continue to struggle to regain the friendship which was first nurtured in hard-fought battles for freedom in Florida. Indeed, it is no extravagation to say that the Seminole freemen present an example of courage and love of freemen unsurpassed, unsurpassed in the annals of the American history. Bring that back. Indeed, it is no extravagation to say that the Seminole freemen present an example of courage and love of freedom unsurpassed in the annals of American freedom. That's interesting. So we the hardest ones to fight for the freedom. Like they wasn't fighting like that nowhere else, just down there in their area, but they've been fighting in their area for so long with these same people, and it's kind of been going back and forth. So that's definitely interesting because I wonder why wasn't nobody else in America fighting as hard as these people. And we got the final note. It is important to bear in mind that the history of the Seminole tribe is unusual in a number of ways. First, the Seminoles are an entirely post-European phenomenon. A diverse group of people speaking different languages and of different races come together to form defense in a complex situation involving the Spanish, English, Americans, and Creeks. Secondly, the Seminoles are unique among North American Indians for the close bond they forged with blacks and for the degree of freedom and power they occurred to those blacks who live among them. This is not surprising given the historical context. The Seminoles needed the blacks them maintain their to help maintain their independence from the Creeks and the Americans, and the Spanish encouraged the partnership to help preserve their own claim to Florida. Now that's just kind of funny how they say, well, the Spanish, they put that together so they can be able to protect the land, and also the Seminoles wanted the blacks so they can have more rank over the Creek. I mean, they're just coming up with more excuses to try to justify why the black people is down there when the black people are already being down there. They try to say that the word Seminole first occurred with these people in 1765, but we already got instances in 1597 where they naming this territory where there's Indians at, South Carolina to Africa. And then you also have different raids and different engagements of war with these people together way before 1765. And they saying that the blacks needed the Indians as allies against the American planters and as protectors against slave hunters. How they protected against slave hunters when they also the slave hunters themselves, and they also slave owners? That don't even make sense. That's what I'm saying. Like, it don't even make sense. They just putting these titles and this saying this stuff just to be able to justify the conditions of the black people and what was going on during that time in America, to say, well, they needed some help. They needed to do this. They was already getting help and being getting help. And in the context of Spain's liberal slavery policies, Florida, and of a wild land where the blacks mighty easily escaped, the Indians could hardly impose strict controls of them. So how is they owners if they can't control them? And although historians have been hesitant to do so, fairness demands that we label the early Seminoles not as the Indian tribe, but as an Afro-Indian tribe. The blacks were among the Seminoles from the inception of their national identity, and they are in an integral part of the early Seminole history. Indeed, the anthropologists have identified Indian customs among the freedmen and African customs among the Indians. That the two groups have been pulled apart by the changing circumstances cannot obscure their common origin. It is no coincidence that the Creeks called their brothers Seminoles, from the Spanish Cimarron, meaning wild, while the Americans called runaway slaves Maroons, from the same Spanish word. Both groups were trying to escape domination by fleeing to a wild country beyond the frontier. And that's the end of the outline. And I just thought that was very interesting that they would say that it is no coincidence that the Creeks called their illustrious brothers Seminoles, from the Spanish Cimarron, meaning wild, while the Americans called runaway slaves Maroons. And this has been a term that been going on since 1513, when they first discovered the Pacific Ocean, and it being labeled on the black indigenous people in America that been fighting for their freedom, and never was enslaved like that. They probably did get enslaved, but they fought. They had many battles before they were enslaved. And that's what I'm pushing, multi-maroon American. And I'm just coming with more pieces to the puzzle so we can keep adding up and put this puzzle together to where it's a clearer picture. Definitely pull up, roll up. I'm so glad that you showed up to comment, like, subscribe, tell a friend, and do it again.